Hi, welcome to the Small Shed. This Saturday I'm trying to find Primrose. See you in a minute. Now, I'm not making anything this week. It was to have been a road trip, but events of isolation and lockdowns have prevented that. But this episode started off back tail end of last year. You may have seen one of the Christmas videos I did. Number 7 was 7 Swans Are Swimming, and it ended up being a build of a model Austin 7. And I mentioned at the time that it was something that probably had been pretty fundamental to my growing up. It was something that I learnt a lot of things when Dad was building the car in the first place. I used to go down and help him in the garage. I learnt to drive with it. It gave me my independence as a 18-year-old, and I did all my courting in it in the early 1970s. So it's got a huge amount of memories. It was something that affected me quite dramatically when I made the video. I hadn't really thought about it for 50 years almost, well 40 anyway. But I had missed the old car, and I thought about that time that it might be worth trying to find it. Now, my brother at the time was starting to suffer with ill health. He'd got Parkinson's and wasn't particularly mobile. I thought if I could find it and go and visit it with him, it would be a great day out. Sadly, Rob succumbed to cancer over Christmas this year and went downhill very rapidly. We had a couple of days chatting about the cars, and I said I was starting to find it, but it wasn't to be that he could make it. So I continued with that search, and I've done a whole load of things, and it's more about a story of how powerful the internet is nowadays, and how it's not always bad things that you get on the internet. So I started off straightforward enough check. You can go onto the government DVLA website and you can check whether a car is taxed and insured. And the first step therefore was to go onto that, type in the number WD815, and sure enough it came up. It came up as a yellow Austin 7, 1930, and it said that it was still currently taxed, and that of course they're now exempt from vehicle tax and they don't need an MOT. But at least I knew it existed, and that was a start. So next up, I then joined a Facebook group for Austin 7 owners, because I thought that might well give me a chance to find it. And I watched that for a day or two, just seeing what was going on. And one or two people were there looking for previous cars, and at that point I hadn't put up pictures or anything. I had also got some photographs I remembered vaguely up in the roof that Dad had left when he passed away, that were of the build of the car and some of its early sort of days out. So I hung around looking at this Facebook group for a couple of months on and off, and what I realised was that the Austin 7 Club have a register of old Austin 7s, of the old chassis numbers and all that sort of thing. So that was the next stage. I popped into that on the web, and sure enough that came up with the number WD815, came up with all the details of it, chassis numbers and everything, and that pointed it in the direction of Scotland. Various Facebook groups while we were away. Every time we managed to stop anywhere, I'd pop into the Wi-Fi in the hotel and have a look at the groups. And all of a sudden, on one of the days on the holiday, a photograph came up of an old Austin 7 with a WD registration number, and the guy raised some question about the car, and then there was a comment came up from a guy who'd got a Rover, I don't know whether it was a P6 or something like that, which is probably a 1950s car, and he said, is that number right? Because I had that number on my car and it didn't seem right to be a 1930s number. And somebody up then came back up and said, no, it was yours that was wrong, it shouldn't have been on your car. And I was watching all of this, and I was about to, because I'd got no photographs with me, I'd cleared all the spare capacity I could on the hard drive of my computer because I was downloading stuff to it every day on holiday. And so I thought, well, I can't go back up and show a picture of my WD and say, yes, it's definitely 1930, but I was just watching this sort of develop, and then all of a sudden, one night, I had that moment that you click on a photograph and there it was, WD815, and there was a message came up from the guy who got it saying, no, this is 1930, it's right, or whatever. And my blood just ran cold at the sight of that. It looked to be just as I'd left it behind. And I fired back immediately and said, we need to talk. And he came back a couple of hours later and said, well, I do know a lot about it, but I don't own it anymore. And he gave me a whole load of history of what had been happening with the car, and I told him where we'd come from in terms of finding it and everything and restoring it. And then he passed on to me the details of the guy that he'd sold it to, who was a minister up in Scotland, which tied in with what I believed, that the car was up in Scotland, and as far as he knew it was still up there. So I couldn't do anything there and then because I was on holiday, but as soon as we got back, got over jet lag, I dug out the photographs in the roof, scanned a couple of them and fired an email off to this guy, and he came back virtually straight away that day with a, how do you do, nice to hear from you, great to hear something about the early days of the car, let me know more, here's my phone number, give me a call. And that's where we are at the moment. I'm just going to go and give him a call now, have a chat with him, and see if I can't arrange to, at least once all this madness is over, do what I'd originally intended to do with my brother, but now probably just do it alone or with my wife. Go up to Scotland and see if we can find the old girl and renew acquaintances. So let's go make that phone call. Peter Lloyd, Gavin. I'm the unfortunate owner many years ago, or sort of owner. Yes, it was a bit of a shock because I sort of set out trying to find it about November, December last year. One thing I'm not sure about was whether or not, does the logbook tell you anywhere what its original colour was? It was blue, was it? That might have been when it changed, and the reason for that is that I've also found a photograph taken in about 1940 of Dad's Nippy that he had, which would got Mum at the wheel with a blackout cowl on one headlamp, and that was Primrose yellow, and that was the reason he wanted the car the same colour. Anyway, what I will do is I will try and I'll scan the photographs I've got. I will try and rack my brain from what I can gather from the photos and things as to tying dates down a little bit more and fill in whatever gaps I can for you. I will do that, and as I said, if as and when it's going out to any rallies when all the madness is over, no, that's fine. I'm more than happy if you can tell me where it's going to be, I would love to come and just touch it again. Scott. Well, there you go. That gives me an incentive to keep going for another 2 years anyway, doesn't it? Just in time. Anyway, thank you so much. I will pass on whatever else I've got and try and update you more as we go. Thank you anyway. Thank you for putting up with somebody getting in touch and disturbing your life, but dig the stuff out. Good. Thank you. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye. Well, that was an interesting 45 minutes on the phone with Gavin, who now owns the car, which I will now be able to refer to as Primrose. We used to just call it Chummy, but apparently it's now known as Primrose. Sorry it wasn't a build video, but in some ways it was. That car was with me from the age of 10 to about 22, 23, and formed a huge part of my growing up, learning about cars, about making things, about going out with girls, about growing up generally. So it's been hugely important in forming my life. So in some ways I suppose it's true to say it made me. A couple of interesting things came out of the conversation. The car itself resided for many of its early years, and 2 owners, in the village of Treddington in Warwickshire, which you may or may not recall from a previous video, is where all my ancestors on my mother's side have come from. So it's sort of ironic that it went full circle from there to our ownership. So whilst it was driving around Treddington, all my ancestors are buried there, and we end up picking it up. So that was one thing. The other thing is it was registered on the 2nd of June, and therefore I've packaged up all the information that I've got for Gavin, taken photographs of all of the photos I've got, and written a history as far as I'm aware of it during our ownership, and that will all be going off to him as a birthday card for Primrose, because 2nd of June is Primrose's 90th birthday. So happy birthday, Primrose. Hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry, as I say, it wasn't a build. It will be next week, and I look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Bye.